Welcome back to Hollywood Latest Reports. The Christian world is in mourning, shaken to its core by the heart-wrenching news that beloved evangelist and gospel icon Jimmy Swaggart has passed away. A towering figure in Christian ministry for over 6 decades, Jimmy's death marks the end of an extraordinary era, one that saw tent revivals turn into television empires, and sinners transformed into saints by the thunderous voice of a man who dared to speak God's truth, even through his own storms. From Baton Rouge to the ends of the earth, the ripple effect of Jimmy's departure is being felt in every church pew, living room, and sanctuary, where his sermons once echoed, and his songs brought hope. The somber announcement came early this morning, sent through an official statement from the Family Worship Center. "It is with heavy hearts and deep sorrow that we confirm Pastor Jimmy Lee Swaggart has gone to be with the Lord," the message read. He passed peacefully, surrounded by loved ones and immersed in prayer. The words struck like thunder, stunning both devoted followers and even his fiercest critics. Within minutes, social media flooded with tributes, testimonials, tears, and prayers. Hashtags like #Jimmy Swaggart Legacy and #Gone Too Soon for the Kingdom began trending globally. Thousands posted old sermon clips, favorite gospel recordings, and personal memories of how Jimmy's voice, music, or message touched their lives. What's perhaps most staggering about Swaggart's death is not just the finality of it, but what it signifies. His name has been synonymous with televangelism for decades. Jimmy Swaggart was one of the first to build a global ministry through television. With a booming voice, signature piano style, and soul-piercing sermons, he inspired generations. His Sunday morning services aired in over 100 countries at their peak. For millions, Jimmy wasn't just a preacher, he was the spiritual father they never had. And now, he's gone. The last weeks of his life, though not fully public, were filled with moments of reflection and grace. According to close sources, Jimmy had been battling health issues quietly for several months. Still, he showed up at the pulpit, often in a wheelchair, refusing to miss the opportunity to minister. "He wanted to go out preaching," said a close family member. "He told us that if he couldn't speak the word of God, then he was ready to meet Jesus. And meet Jesus he did." The grief is especially heavy for his wife, Frances Swaggart, who stood beside him through it all: the revivals, the scandals, the restoration, and the redemption. Known for her sharp commentary and unwavering faith, Frances has not yet spoken publicly, but in private, sources say she is devastated and inconsolable. In recent years, the two were rarely seen apart, especially during broadcasts of Frances and Friends, their daily television program. Together, they were the spiritual matriarch and patriarch of a ministry that reached millions. Now, Frances must walk this road without the man she called "my Jimmy" for over 70 years. More heartbreaking is the emotional scene insiders describe from his final moments. Surrounded by his family, including his son Donnie Swaggart and grandson Gabriel Swaggart, both preachers carrying his legacy, Jimmy reportedly whispered final words: "Stay faithful. Preach the cross, I'll see you again." Those words are now etched in the hearts of all who loved him. It wasn't just a farewell, it was a commission, a torch passed on from the founder of a movement to the next generation of spiritual warriors. But the mourning stretches beyond the Swaggart family. Across America and abroad, entire churches held spontaneous prayer vigils upon hearing the news. Congregations in Nigeria, Brazil, the Philippines, and beyond turned their Sunday services into memorials. Pastors who had never met Jimmy, but were mentored by his ministry from afar, wept in front of their flocks. "It feels like we've lost a general in God's army," one pastor in Kenya posted. "Brother Swaggart led me to Jesus through his cassette sermons. Today, heaven gained." For those who followed Jimmy's journey closely, his life was more than ministry. It was a testimony of grace. Born into a poor family in Faraday, Louisiana, Jimmy's early life was far from glamorous. But even as a child, his talent was unmistakable. By age 9, he was already playing gospel music by ear, and by the 1950s, he was preaching at revivals across the South. It wasn't long before his voice hit the airwaves, and the world began listening. But Jimmy's path wasn't without controversy. His ministry faced public scandals in the late 80s and early 90s that would have destroyed most men. But Jimmy was not most men. He didn't quit. He wept, repented, and kept preaching. Critics mocked him. The media tried to cancel him. Yet through it all, Jimmy Swaggart rebuilt his ministry, not by chasing fame, but by clinging to the cross. That same cross became the centerpiece of every sermon, every broadcast, and every song he would deliver until his final breath. His resilience became his greatest message. To the backslider, the broken, the addicted, and the lost, Jimmy Swaggart was proof that God wasn't finished with them yet. He embodied the very redemption he preached, and for that, he earned a special place in the hearts of many. Even in his twilight years, Jimmy remained active. He preached from a seated position. He counseled his team. He continued to record music. His album, The Healing Jesus, released just 2 years ago, soared on Christian charts, proof that his voice still moved mountains. He would often tell his church, "I don't need a rocking chair, I need a pulpit." That fire, that zeal, that unshakable call to ministry burned bright until the end. The Family Worship Center, his church in Baton Rouge, has announced a week-long period of mourning and celebration. Tributes are pouring in. Christian leaders from all denominations have offered condolences. Even celebrities, politicians, and former critics are acknowledging his influence. Franklin Graham tweeted, "Jimmy Swaggart was a flawed man like all of us, but he loved Jesus and reached millions. Well done, good and faithful servant." T.D. Jakes wrote, "A pioneer, a preacher, a worshipper. He leaves behind a legacy that cannot be erased." But what now? What happens to the ministry, to the Swaggart legacy? According to Gabriel Swaggart, the ministry will continue. "Papa always told me, it's not about me, it's about the message of the cross. And that message doesn't die with him. We will preach, we will sing, we will keep the fire burning." Gabriel and Donnie have been co-leading services for years, preparing for this moment, though hoping it would never come. Now the torch is fully theirs, and it seems they are ready. As the world prepares for his official memorial, expected to be broadcast globally, the reality is settling in. There will never be another Jimmy Swaggart. He was a once-in-a-generation voice, a flawed man, a redeemed warrior, a father in faith to millions. His death is not just a passing, it's a punctuation mark at the end of a spiritual revolution that changed the world. In this moment of collective grief, it's hard to put into words what Jimmy meant to those who found Christ through his ministry. For some, he was their first Bible. For others, he was the voice they heard while lying in a hospital bed, contemplating suicide and choosing life instead. His sermons broke chains, his music dried tears, his fire sparked revivals, and now, though his voice is silent, his message roars louder than ever. He leaves behind a family who adored him, a congregation that depended on him, a generation of preachers molded in his image, and a global Christian community grieving, praying, and remembering the man who never stopped believing that the gospel was enough. As we say goodbye to Jimmy Swaggart, we do so with tears, but also with triumph. Because while his earthly ministry may be over, his legacy has just begun. Heaven gained a lion of the faith, earth lost a voice, but not the echo, and somewhere beyond the clouds, one can only imagine Jimmy at his piano, playing for the king he spent his life preaching about. Rest well, Brother Swaggart, the cross still stands, the gospel still saves, and your race is. The shockwaves of Jimmy Swaggart's death didn't stop at the borders of the United States. They reverberated around the world in ways few could have anticipated. From megachurches in South Korea to small congregations in rural Africa, from gospel choirs in Jamaica to missionaries in South America, the reaction was unanimous. We have lost one of the last living giants of modern-day Christianity. Candlelight vigils were held in churches across 5 continents. Screens replayed his classic sermons and gospel songs, and pastors paused their regular Sunday messages to reflect on the impact Swaggart had on their ministries and lives. But beyond the tears, beyond the hymns of sorrow, a deeper conversation has begun, a spiritual reckoning with what it means to lose someone of such monumental significance. For many, Swaggart's death isn't just about mourning a preacher, it's about the end of a prophetic voice that challenged the lukewarm, called out sin, and championed the power of the cross. He was one of the few who preached repentance without sugarcoating it. In an age where sermons often drift into motivational talks and feel-good theology, Jimmy stayed rooted in old-time gospel truths. Fire and brimstone? Yes. But also forgiveness and healing. That balance is what drew millions to him, and what will now be painfully missed. At the heart of the grief is the Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a place that has become a spiritual home to countless believers over the years. Since the announcement of his death, the church has been flooded with flowers, handwritten letters, and people traveling from all over the country just to sit in the pews where Jimmy once stood. The church's entrance is now adorned with large portraits of Jimmy Swaggart from every era of his life: the fiery young evangelist of the 70s, the tearful yet defiant preacher of the 90s, and the grey-haired patriarch of recent years whose voice never lost its thunder. Inside the sanctuary, there's a profound silence, one that only the loss of a spiritual father can bring. Members sit quietly, some sobbing, others simply staring at the pulpit as if waiting for Jimmy to emerge one more time, Bible in hand, ready to declare, "Turn to the book of Romans, chapter 6. but he won't. That voice is gone. And yet, somehow, it still echoes. In the stained glass windows, in the speakers, in the memories of every soul who was changed by his message. Close family members have begun sharing behind-the-scenes stories from Jimmy's final days. According to Donnie Swaggart, Jimmy's only son, his father spent the last week of his life in prayer, worship, and singing hymns. He wasn't afraid, Donnie said through tears. He knew where he was going. He told us, "I've seen the Lord, He's waiting for me, and I'm ready." That holy confidence gave the family peace, even as they watched his health rapidly decline. He died as he lived, Donnie continued. In the present, Gabriel Swaggart, Jimmy's grandson, took to the pulpit just hours after the death was announced. Choking back tears, he addressed the congregation. "My papa is gone, but he has not died in vain," Gabriel said. "His legacy is not in the fame, the cameras, or the buildings. It's in every soul that was saved, every broken marriage that was restored, every addict who found freedom, every backslider who came home." The congregation stood to their feet in roaring applause, their grief momentarily transformed into gratitude. They knew they were witnessing history, a generational baton being passed in real time. Meanwhile, networks scrambled to air special tributes. Christian television channels like TBN and Daystar cleared their schedules to run marathon broadcasts of Jimmy's past sermons and music performances. Clips of his fiery preaching, piano solos, and heartfelt altar calls dominated the airwaves. Viewership skyrocketed. Many young viewers who had only heard of Swaggart through their grandparents were now seeing the man in action for the first time, discovering for themselves why he was revered. You didn't believe it with all his heart, and he made you feel something eternal. You didn't have to agree with everything Jimmy Swaggart said, one commentator noted, but you could never deny that he believed it with all his heart, and he made you feel something eternal. You didn't have to agree with everything Jimmy Swaggart said, one commentator noted, but you could never deny that he believed it with all his heart, and he made you feel something. You didn't have to agree with everything Jimmy Swaggart said, one commentator noted, but you could never deny that he believed it with all his heart, and he made you feel something eternal. You didn't have to agree with noted, but you could never deny that he. But while the tributes poured in, some began to ask, why did Jimmy Swaggart's death affect people so deeply? Why did it feel like losing a family member, even for those who never met? The answer lies not in his fame, but in his faithfulness. In a world that changes overnight, Jimmy was a constant. Through wars, pandemics, scandals, and spiritual dry seasons, he remained. People grew up with his voice playing in the background of their lives. Parents introduced their children to his music. Entire families were baptized after watching his crusades. His messages outlived cassette tapes, VHS, CDs, and even DVDs, migrating into the streaming age without losing. And now, that voice is silent. As we say goodbye to a true general of faith, let us not forget the fire he carried. Jimmy Swaggart may be gone, but his message, his music, and his ministry live on in all of us. Let's keep preaching the cross, living in grace, and praying for the Swaggart family. Rest in glory, Brother Jimmy. Your race is finished, but your legacy is eternal. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help keep his legacy alive.